Emma was 23 years old and lived alone in a small apartment at the edge of the city. Life had not been easy for her. She worked at a grocery store during the day and cleaned offices at night. Even after working 2 jobs, she barely earned enough money to survive. One cold Monday evening, she sat at her kitchen table and stared at a letter. It was her final rent notice. If she didn't pay within 3 days, she would be evicted. Emma rubbed her tired eyes and checked her bank account again. Nothing had changed. She still didn't have enough money. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. For a long moment, she just sat there. Then she heard a sound. A quiet click. It came from somewhere inside the apartment. Emma looked up. The apartment was silent. She lived alone. At least, she thought she did. After a few seconds, she shook her head. Maybe she was just tired. She finished her tea and went to bed. The next morning, she noticed something strange. The chair near the window was facing a different direction. Emma stopped. She was certain she had pushed it under the table before sleeping. Slowly, she walked closer. Maybe she had forgotten. People forget things all the time. Still, a strange feeling settled in her stomach. That night, after returning from work, she found another odd thing. A coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter. Not unusual. Except she had washed every dish before leaving. And the mug was wet. Freshly washed. Emma stared at it for several seconds. Her apartment door had been locked. No windows were open. Nobody should have been inside. She tried to convince herself there was a simple explanation. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The next day, she bought a small notebook. Every morning before leaving, she wrote down exactly how everything looked. The position of chairs, the dishes, the curtains, the lights, everything. 3 days later, she compared her notes. The changes were real. Someone was entering her apartment. Or worse, someone was already living inside it. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every small sound made her sit up. Every creak of the floor felt louder than normal. At 3 in the morning, she heard footsteps. Very soft footsteps. Above her. Emma's eyes opened instantly. Above her? There was no upstairs apartment. Only the roof. Her heart started pounding. Slowly, she got out of bed. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed felt even worse. She grabbed her phone and switched on the flashlight. Then she looked toward the ceiling. Nothing. No sound. No movement. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The next afternoon, Emma spent her last $50 on a small security camera. If someone was entering her apartment, she wanted proof. She placed the camera on a bookshelf facing the living room. Then she left for work. The entire day felt endless. When she finally returned home, she locked the door and immediately opened the camera footage. At first, nothing happened. Hours passed. The apartment remained empty. Then, shortly after midnight, the image changed. Emma leaned closer to the screen. A shadow moved across the room. Her breath caught. Someone was there. The figure appeared from a narrow space behind a large storage cabinet. A space Emma had never noticed before. The person stepped into the room. He looked thin, dirty, nervous. He searched the kitchen quietly. Then he washed dishes, straightened books, folded a blanket. Emma stared in complete disbelief. The stranger wasn't stealing. He was cleaning. The footage continued. The man sat quietly in a chair and looked around the apartment. His face seemed sad, lonely. Then, just before sunrise, he disappeared behind the cabinet again. Emma paused the video. Her hands were shaking. Someone had been secretly living inside her apartment. But why? And where exactly was he hiding? The next day, she called her landlord. He arrived an hour later. Together, they moved the cabinet. Behind it was a hidden door. A very small hidden room existed between 2 apartment walls. The landlord looked shocked. "I had no idea this was here," he said. Emma stared at the dark opening. Someone was definitely living inside it. But when they entered, the room was empty. Only a blanket, a flashlight, and a small notebook. Emma opened the notebook. The first page contained a name. Daniel. The pages that followed were filled with handwritten notes. Most of them were about Emma. At first, fear rushed through her body. Then she started reading. Daniel had been homeless for months. He had discovered the hidden room by accident during building repairs. He wrote about how lonely he felt, how afraid he was, how he never intended to hurt anyone. Then Emma reached the final pages. Her eyes widened. Daniel knew she couldn't pay her rent. He had overheard her crying one night. He had written, "I wish I could help her. She works harder than anyone I've ever seen." Emma turned another page and froze. Inside the notebook was an envelope. She opened it carefully. Money. A lot of money. Far more than her rent. There was also a short note. "If you are reading this, I have already left. This money belonged to my father. I found it years ago and never used it. You need it more than I do. Thank you for unknowingly making me feel less alone." Emma sat in silence. Nothing made sense. A stranger had secretly lived inside her apartment. A stranger she had never met. A stranger who could have stolen from her. Instead, he had helped her. The landlord searched for Daniel. The police searched too. But nobody ever found him. Weeks passed. Emma paid her rent. Life slowly returned to normal. Or at least she thought it had. Then one evening she came home from work. Something caught her eye. A coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, freshly washed. Emma stopped moving. The apartment was silent. The hidden room was empty. The door was locked. Slowly, she walked toward the mug. Beside it sat a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, she opened it. Only one sentence was written inside. "I told you I wasn't completely gone." Emma looked around the apartment. The silence felt different now. And somewhere inside the walls, she thought she heard the faint sound of footsteps.